Rivers State Administrator Vice Admiral Ibok-Ete Ekwe Ibas, retired, has met with the labor unions to discuss key matters and pledge its commitment to workers' welfare. The Rivers State government has met with the leadership of organized labor unions to discuss key labor matters and reaffirm its commitment to workers' welfare. The meeting, held at the Government House in Port Harcourt, provided a platform for frank discussions on issues affecting workers in the state. The administrator of Rivers State, Vice Admiral Ibok-Ete Ekwe Ibas, retired, highlighted several interventions to improve working conditions for civil servants. These include timely payment of salaries and pensions, resolution of salary arrears for newly employed staff at Rivers State University Teaching Hospital and the judiciary, and compliance with the minimum wage for all local government employees. Ibas, in a statement by his media aide, Hector Ibok-Ete, commended workers for their dedication to service and called for sustained partnership with labor unions to maintain industrial peace. He said, "This administration recognizes workers as critical partners in development. We remain committed to addressing your legitimate concerns within available resources." The Rivers State NLC chairman, Comrade Alex Akanwok, thanked the administrator for the steps taken so far with regards to workers' welfare and appreciated his disposition towards alleviating the transportation problems faced by workers. The Rivers State government assured all workers of its unwavering commitment to their welfare and urged continued dedication to service delivery for the progress of the state. The government said it is also reviewing the implementation challenges of the contributory pension scheme ahead of July 2025 deadline and is actively considering implementing the 32,000 naira consequential adjustment for pensioners and clearing outstanding gratuities. Honorable Buke, what do you make of the story?
I think that, first of all, today's May 1, and
yes,
it's been nice to extend our warmest regards to workers, the contributions they make in advancement of society, the creation of wealth, you know, and on a day like this when they could get together to say solidarity forever.
Forever, yes.
Our solidarity is with them.
I accept that as well because I'm a worker. Thank you very much, Honorable Buke.
Now,
thank you.
I think that the meeting between both sides, I mean the organized labor and the sole administrator, for me is welcome, although it should have come earlier than this.
Okay.
But some of the major issues relating to welfare, you know, that were discussed, in my opinion, certainly will set the ball rolling. Particularly for workers. You know that prior to this time, workers in Rivers State got their salaries as early as the 26th.
Okay.
There were no delays when it came to matters of workers' salaries, their welfare requirements. And some would have raised alarm when salaries were no longer coming as it should. And I'm certain that in that area, Fubara did well, never played with what workers'
welfare
required. And so Ibas holding a meeting, you know, to have some understanding of maybe those challenges that Rivers workers are facing, and also trying to assure them that going forward, government will do what is welcome. I think too that perhaps the unsung ones, the ones who have gone before, who are pensioners,
yes,
and whose welfare needs sometimes could be easily swept under the carpet. It was good to hear, particularly that the adjustment, 22% that's due them, will be put in motion. And I think that that should make those now in quotes, some of them are elder statesmen.
Yeah.
That should make them happy. The regularity of payments. Because the only source. Most of them didn't invest in business. Most of them just knew just how to work.
Yeah.
And so now that they are no longer working, they are no longer active, it may make sense that little one
32,000 naira
and that gets to them. What a shame. For all the
that amount
for all the
years of service.
Yeah.
32,000 naira.
I remember when I voluntarily retired from Radio Rivers, I was shocked. For 18 years, what we got was
a paltry sum.
Yeah, and I've never really bothered about going back to say, pay me pension. What are you asking yourself? So we work every day so that we can live every day too. But that's it. I think that is a welcome development. I think that at least workers understand the direction of the Ibas administration. Think that they would have been able to trash out gray areas. I hope that the administrator would, going forward, listen to whatever expressions are coming from the workforce. You know what has happened, the reaction of MBA and all.
Yeah.
There are certain things, no go areas. I think there are things that in a democracy, perhaps those who govern us must tolerate.
Okay, very well. Now, talking about reaction, you talked about the reaction of the MBA. Now, I want to periscope a bit on the reaction of the NLC and the position NLC has taken so far in Rivers State crisis. I mean, it is not hidden that NLC has backed Governor Simlaye Fubara so far in the crisis. In fact, Alex Akamo, the NLC chairman, has also called for press conference over time, addressing the crisis in Rivers State, right? Even though they said they were doing it under the guise of workers' welfare, particularly when the justice barred CBN from releasing federal allocation to Rivers State. Now, so far, NLC has taken the side of the governor, understandably, because the governor has also, showed so much love to workers in Rivers State, so one could understand the sentiment. However, on the heels of the suspension of the Rivers State governor, NLC took a position as well, condemning the actions of the federal government. And then Ibas resuming duties as sole administrator, NLC also condemned that as well. Today is Nigerian Workers' Day. NLC on, the march past that NLC usually indulges every governor every May 1st. It's not happening in Rivers State today. They are actually gathering at the Labour House at D-Line. Now, this is in protest of the emergency rule in Rivers State. Do you think that this meeting between the Rivers State government, headed by the sole administrator, and NLC, do you think it will de-escalate tension between both sides?
I think, somebody has said it is better to judge than war. And the fact that there was a meeting, prior to May-Day, also indicates that the government is sensitive about the reactions of Labour. Okay, Labour stood not on the side of SIM, he stood on the side of the people.
On the side of the people?
Yes.
Why do you say that?
Yes, because there's been widespread condemnation across the country of the decision to implement Section 305 the way the administration did. It didn't provide and has never provided. There's nowhere in the rules, in the books, where you find the suspension of a governor. And then, of course, there are processes for declaration of state of emergency. The governor is, under the law, under the constitution, entitled to invite the federal government, declare a state of emergency. All of those were not taken, but it doesn't matter. What was rejected was not Ibas as a person. What was rejected was the act that brought Ibas. Okay. What you saw is that Nigerians do not want the rule of force. They want democracy. They want the rule,
Would
rule
you
of
say
law.
that prior to the declaration of state of emergency, there was democracy in Rivers State?
Of course.
Okay. Now, in a democratic in a democratic state, we have the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary. Would you say that we had the legislature in Rivers State?
To a point, we did, and then to a point, because of the provisions of the same constitution, 1091G says that if you, in times when there is no crisis in your party, you make the move to abandon the platform that brought you to power, you are liable to losing your seat.
But is that self-executory?
It's not.
If it's not self-executory, what empowers an executive to suspend or derecognize the legislature?
I figure that, you see, pursuant to that provision, the government sought legal interpretation. Standing, if we were to look at pronouncements that have been made prior to this time by the Supreme Court over and over, the position in the crossover case, the position on the Labour member who defected, all of those things should forge a direction.
A precedent.
Yeah, we should have a precedent. In Nigeria, sometimes.
But there's also a precedent in Supreme Court that does not allow the governor to do what he did. In the matter of Joshua Dariye, when he was impeached by, I think, few members of the House, the Supreme Court ruled that unless a state House of Assembly forms a quorum for a certain legislation, they can gather, but they cannot legislate on that. And, you know, I think Joshua Dariye was impeached by either 12 members of the House, either 8 or 12 members of the House.
About
and 8, yes.
That.
And Supreme Court, in its judgment, condemned that action and said that they did not form a quorum to legislate on the impeachment of the governor, right? So, and then the same constitution says that a state House of Assembly shall have minimum of 24 seats and maximum of 40 seats. 40 seats is obtainable in Kano State, right? Now, that's the minimum. However, in Rivers State, we had a situation where a budget was presented to 4-man, and the 4-man, I'll call them forum of friends because that's what the Supreme Court said, so that I'm not, you know, held in contempt. So now, in light of that, the governor went ahead. So there is a precedence that says the constitutional provision, a House of Assembly shall at no time have less than 24. But the governor presented the budget to 4 people and still went ahead. And you know, in his statement, he also said he gave the Rivers State House of Assembly a floating, that they are boys, that he knows he paid their children's school fees, that they are existing because he allowed them to exist. So one would say, if we are looking at condemnation of the state of emergency, and you said that they are condemning democratic rule, the question would be, was there democracy in Rivers State by Governor Fubara?
Now, I think the argument, insofar as I'm concerned, is something that's usually, excuse me, based on what people's perception of the rule of law is.
Yeah.
Now, please note that prior to the peace deal brokered by the president, this matter was properly instituted in a court of law. And of course, you're likely to expect the court would have ordered, given a restraining order, asking these people not to parade pending the outcome of that decision. When that happens, it gives, of course, the one who takes a matter to court benefits from the fruit of his labor to some extent, pending when those pronouncements, real or imagined, are taken. Now, for me, I do not imagine that the idea behind the posture of the Rivers State government was to sideline the legislature. No. All of us, except we are not telling ourselves the entire truth, we are witnesses to the decision of the legislators, to defect. One after the other, they presented their defection on the floor of Parliament. And that was capped by the position also the Speaker of the House. At that point in time, the red flag had to be raised. Okay, was it constitutional for that action? Because we saw them singing on the mandate, But all of that is gone now. The Supreme Court says they are valid members of the House. They are members of the PDP. Maybe for some reason that I don't know, they are saying particulars were not presented. I don't know what kind of particulars. And that if we were to look at the issue the way it is, because that matter did not progress, it's like the Supreme Court took segments, okay? There was a matter standing in a lower court. And in some claims, the Supreme Court would simply have said that matter has not matured. It would not have ventured. But maybe some of the decisions that the Supreme Court takes may not be completely legal. Sometimes they have to create some political balance. Okay? You know that in this country, Justice Ibok-Ete said, the argument of two-thirds majority shouldn't be cited, particularly in the case that it determined in the Shagari era. So, you see, what that means is that perhaps it was a decision of some convenience, but which was not strictly backed by law, because, of course, the issue of the 1/3 or something wasn't properly articulated. It maybe fell short somewhere along the line. So, but this is the thing. I think that where we are now, one should have asked if the Supreme Court gave a ruling asking the governor to represent the budget, if the Supreme Court gave a ruling saying local government elections should be quashed, if the Supreme Court had given directives on what should happen. In a country of laws, one would be shocked that rather than implement the pronouncement of the Supreme Court, the federal government flipped. Now, but the good thing is there are conversations going on. The good thing is that perhaps the voice of the people.
The question I want to ask is very simple. If the president's action with regards to the state of emergency is being condemned wildly, one would say, if the president had declared state of emergency, the reason for the state of emergency is the political crisis in Rivers State as a result of the impasse between the Rivers State House of Assembly and the governor. They are the two major actors. The FCT minister's hands are being fingered, yes, but at this point, the major crisis is between the legislature and the executive. And if the president, I want you to give me an honest answer. If the president had declared state of emergency and still left the governor and the Rivers State House of Assembly still in that embroidery with all their powers to function, do you think declaring of state of emergency would have worked if they were not suspended?
Listen.
Do you think it would have worked?
You declare an emergency, a state of emergency, either where security threats exist, where there's a complete breakdown of law and order. In all of these circumstances, there was no breakdown in law and order.
Bombing of pipelines, what was that?
Oh God, where?
The bombing of pipelines didn't happen.
Now, you hold on. The NNPC made it very clear that what happened was as a result of a leak. So there was no bombing. There was
two bombings side by side. Okay, it was just mere explosion. It was coincidental.
Now, so this is the point. Of course, that in a country where you do illegal bunkering, where people tamper with pipelines, there is a likelihood that pipelines could go up in flames.
Okay.
Now, but you see, one thing I'd like you to understand, particularly because sometimes the impression is created that a legitimate court order was not. In our laws, you have right to appeal. when you appeal, you ask for a stay of execution. And then you ask for those pleas that you expect the court to make pronouncements on. Okay? And it was obvious that because this thing has a constitutional outlook, that it will run the full course. Now, when the High Court made these pronouncements, there was an attempt by the former administration to approach the Apex Court, the Appellate Court, the Appellate Court, which is a Court of Appeal. And at the Court of Appeal level, when the judgment came, they also entered their intention, to proceed to the Supreme Court for a final interpretation. And when the interpretation was made, the governor of Rivers State invited those assemblymen, because at that point they had become legit. Their membership of the House validated by the highest court in the land. Okay? So, if you have to follow this thing step by step, for me, I'm a bit amazed when people place blames. Because if our courts were structured in a given manner, that when the rule is final, nobody will appeal. It means that you don't go ahead and implement. But if you have doubts, if you believe that the trial court erred in some areas, you seek further interpretation. And our laws allow that. Okay, so for anyone to say that SIM ignored court
but was the stay of execution granted? Because I'm aware that some stay of executions were rejected by the appellate court.
It all depends.
Was it granted?
It depends. Look, if they reject a stay of execution, the implication is that they will give you an order to go ahead and obey this thing. Because there are, I think, I'm not a lawyer. Yes, I was in the House. But I know that there are due processes that are followed when it comes to legal issues. Okay? Now, this decision that you have taken has not gone down well with me. Accordingly, I will appeal this judgment. Your lawyer said that before the trial judge, and follow it up with their presentation, to the upper court, and so goes the process. But what is critical is that when the final decision was taken, what did the governor of Rivers State do? He obeyed the court order.
Which of them?
He asked for the, for the local government elections to be quashed on grounds that
it has been dissolved by Supreme Court.
Because the Supreme Court said it did not follow strictly some of the provisions of the Electoral Act. Right? Whatever that means. That was complied with. The fact that you invited lawmakers, 27 of them, said, look, all right, this matter has been decided. Come, let's meet. Of course, there's usually a relationship between Parliament and the executive, except that maybe at this point in time, some people no longer understood their role as lawmakers. Because that's my own assumption of it. Because if it's not personal, the issues were issues of law, the issues were issues of state, and these issues have been resolved, then there will be no need to break communication. Now, this governor invited them so they could have a template, have a conversation around it. They didn't come. He proceeded to present the budget twice. The gates were locked. Okay? So you see, sometimes I wonder who really erred in obeying the decision of the Supreme Court.
I love this conversation that I'm having with you, and I am enjoying your perspective as well. But however, I feel that in between there are some gray areas that also has to be addressed. Now, you recall that after the Supreme Court judgment, the governor did have a press conference. He addressed the press. He addressed Rivers people, and that was when he gave a marching order. In fact, in that press conference, that was when he implemented selectively implemented the Supreme Court judgment.
Selective.
Yes, I said that with every boldness. And I yes, I said that. Yeah, well, this is the reason. No. When he was speaking, you know, he immediately implemented, it was, you recall that the Supreme Court judgment, it was a consolidated matter. And that judgment came as one. In one single, in that hearing, all these matters were addressed. Judgments were given by the Supreme Court. Now, the governor in his press release said implemented Supreme Court judgments on local government, on local government elections, and even further gave RISEC instructions there and then. But then, moving forward, he said in the same press statement, he implemented Supreme Court judgments on local government elections. That's in that press statement. And then he went further to say that with regards to the same Supreme Court judgment on the Rivers State House of Assembly, that he is yet to receive the CTC copy of the Supreme Court judgment, and that he needs to receive the CTC copy and study it and also get advice by his legal team. Now, I find that interesting because it would have made more, it would have made more sense.
No.
It would have made more sense if the governor waited to receive the CTC copy before implementing any part of that judgment at all. So I am finding it kind of discombobulating that he immediately understood the Supreme Court judgment on local government, but that of the River State House of Assembly needs to be studied.
All right.
Go ahead.
Now, the point is quite clear here. Okay. For those who go to court, litigants know that even after a pronouncement by a court that you apply for a CTC, both the winner and the loser, because there are thin lines in those decisions that, if taken on the face value, can be wrongly implemented.
Okay.
Now, for this matter, if you recall, there were too many accounts, even in the media, of what should be the pronouncement of the Supreme Court. Okay? And it was necessary, absolutely necessary. I remember that statement. He told the state that they should give him up to Friday, by which time he should have in his possession, so that he also in implementing the position of the Supreme Court, there will be no ambiguities. Okay? So, I, again, do not think that in implementing the Supreme Court decision, that the governor sought to be selective.
One would have said he would have waited,
as they say,
even to implement the local government election. Because there were 10 lines too that he needed to understudy in that of the local government election. Don't you agree?
It all depends on, look, it depends on your brief. Because, of course, you know that even though he had a lawyer, the Attorney General of Rivers State was also attending court. So it depends on what brief and what details they had at the time. Particularly of course, when you say to a gentleman that you've had a fight with, this fight is over, let bygones be bygones, let's have a conversation. It's over. It's over. You know, so the argument that the decision of the governor to do what is right, what is allowed by law, the acquisition of the CTC, and you see that as a stalling mechanism, in my view, is too not too correct. Okay, because
let me ask you,
yes, Honorable. What do you want to ask?
Honorable, go on. Now, you recall when the Supreme Court gave judgment in favor of Governor Rotimi Amechi?
Yes. Against
Celestine Omehia?
Yes.
How long did it take for that judgment to be implemented? Did Celestine Omehia say, let me get the CTC and study it?
Look.
Before hold on. before obeying Supreme Court judgment. That judgment of the Supreme Court.
I think you're playing the devil's advocate here.
No, hold on.
I think that's what you're doing.
Well,
you're playing the devil's advocate.
Interestingly, if the other party comes, they will also accuse me of the same thing. But I'm doing my job.
I agree.
I'm enjoying doing it right now a lot with you on the show. Now, the Celestine Ume here, how long did it take for that Supreme Court judgment to be implemented?
Listen,
because I know obtaining a CTC copy takes at least 7 days.
Deep down, I was then I was publishing, so I really covered that event.
Okay.
And there was a lot of going forward and going backwards.
Yeah,
right. Supreme Court, there was a time the matter was almost stalled at the Court of Appeal level. And whatever decision they got, and the Supreme Court said to the Court of Appeal, who spoke English, and we ask you to expeditiously treat this matter. Okay? But in that case, the declarative decision of the Supreme Court was not in doubt. You understand? The language of delivery, the specific delivery of justice was not in doubt. Okay, the issue was whether or not Celestine Ume was the governor of Rivers State. And the Supreme Court held that he did not exist in law because he was like an interloper hoisted on the PDP by powers that be. Okay?
Okay.
So that is it. But no, and as they say, matters of law, no two matters are the same. But to say that in obedience to due processes allowed by our courts, which entitles one who is either the victor or the loser to acquire a CTC, and which gives him room to understand the full context of the decisions taken.
You're right, very well.
Now, all of those were not delay tactics, and I believe that there was some sincerity in terms of compliance, and substantially the governor of Rivers State complied with the decision of the Supreme Court.